issue is once again before the U.S. Supreme Court. And today, justices heard arguments in a case that could significantly restrict access to mifepristone, a commonly used abortion drug prescribed for decades. It's the biggest abortion case since the court overturned Roe v. Wade 2 years ago. And it's sparking protests on both sides of the issue, even here locally. Today, a reproductive rights coalition rallied outside Chicago's federal court building. They object to a ban on mifepristone and say it's a safe option for women. In North suburban Deerfield, pro-life activists gathered in front of the Walgreens headquarters to protest the pharmaceutical company selling mifepristone at its stores. The rally was organized by Students for Life, one of the leading pro-life advocacy organizations in the world.
Abortion is healthcare. Healthcare is the right.
Today, a high-stakes hearing before the U.S. Supreme Court today that could dramatically change the accessibility of medical abortions. The case prompting rallies here in the Chicago area by supporters on both sides of the issue. ABC 7 political reporter Craig Wall with more on this case before the High Court. Craig.
Due to this case before the Supreme Court is one coming out of Texas, where an appellate judge had revoked the FDA approval of mifepristone more than a year ago. It's another hot-button issue before the court with nationwide implications. The Supreme Court justices seemed to indicate today during oral arguments that they were inclined to keep mifepristone legal. It gained FDA approval more than 2 decades ago, but then more recently the agency loosened restrictions to make it available by mail at pharmacies and after telehealth appointments. Today, supporters of abortion rights rallied outside the federal courthouse in Chicago, calling on the Supreme Court to keep the abortion drug legal.
This is a terrifying attack on a safe form of health care, and we will fight it, and we will make sure that we win, so that medication abortion remains an accessible option for everyone.
In Deerfield today, outside the Walgreens headquarters, opponents of abortion rights rallied and called on the pharmaceutical giant to stop selling mifepristone. They also had a message for the Supreme Court.
All that the pro-life petitioners, the doctors and nurses and other medical professionals who brought this case to the Supreme Court today were asking is that we go back to the restrictions that the FDA placed on abortion drugs when it first approved them in the year 2000.
The group raising concerns about potential medical complications, even though the drug is widely considered safe.
Walgreens and CVS, get out of the abortion industry. United States Supreme Court, stop the unsafe distribution of these pills through telemedicine, mail, and at pharmacies.
But supporters of the abortion pill counter that the drug is safe regardless of how it's distributed, and they are sounding the alarm about the implications for women if the Supreme Court rules to restrict it.
With this case, the Supreme Court could roll back the hands of time and limit access to essential reproductive health care. But we're gathered here today in solidarity to say, not on our watch.
The Supreme Court only heard arguments on the case today. A ruling is expected by the end of June, but of course it has major implications for the election in November. More on that coming up at 6.
All right, Craig, we'll look for that report. Thanks.
Abortion is healthcare. Healthcare is the right.
The Supreme Court hears arguments on whether to restrict access to the abortion pill. Coming up at 4:30, details on today's hearing and several rallies held in Chicago. Groups rally in Chicago as the nation's high court takes up the legal fight over the access to the abortion pill. The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments on the abortion pill case today.
The medication mifepristone was used in nearly 2/3 of all abortions in the U.S. last year. It is the first abortion case to go before the High Court since the justices overturned Roe v. Wade 2 years ago. In nearly 90 minutes of arguments, the justices appeared to signal that the challenge by opponents to the medication lacked the legal standing to challenge the FDA's approval of the drug.
If we agree with you on standing, could you give us an example of who would have standing to challenge these FDA actions?
Justice Thomas, I think that if the question is whether there would be individuals who generally oppose abortion who would have standing and want to challenge FDA's actions, the answer to that is no. But the reason is because those people aren't regulated in any relevant way under FDA's decisions here.
Only two justices, conservatives Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, appeared to show some support for the anti-abortion challengers. Meanwhile, demonstrators on both sides of the abortion issue marched and chanted outside of the Supreme Court.
Today's Supreme Court hearing has fired up activists on both sides of the issue, and they held local rallies earlier today.
Abortion pills are here to stay. Ho, ho. Hey, hey. Abortion pills are...
A coalition of reproductive justice organizations rallied outside Chicago's federal court building this afternoon. They say mifepristone has been safely used in the U.S. for more than 2 decades, and the move to ban it has nothing to do with medical science.
This case that could restrict access to mifepristone for people nationwide is part of the anti-abortion movement's plan to ban abortion everywhere for everyone. This is a terrifying attack on a safe form of healthcare, and we will fight it, and we will make sure that we win, so that medication abortion remains an accessible option for everyone.
Anti-abortion activists held a separate rally today outside of the Walgreens headquarters in Deerfield.
This month, Walgreens joined the abortion business. Walgreens became an abortion company. Walgreens and CVS, get out of the abortion industry. The United States Supreme Court, stop the unsafe distribution of these pills through telemedicine, through the mail, and at pharmacies.
The anti-abortion activists claim mifepristone is not safe. They say they gathered 29,000 signatures on a petition demanding its removal from Walgreens stores. Supreme Court hearing arguments today on the future of the medical abortion drug mifepristone. What we're hearing from today's arguments and how justices responded and reaction from protests on both sides of the issue here in Chicago.
The Supreme Court heard arguments today on whether or not to preserve access to the abortion medication mifepristone.
It's the court's first abortion case since conservative justices overturned Roe v. Wade 2 years ago. WGN's Shannon Halligan has the latest reactions from local advocates about the proceedings so far. Shannon.
Yeah, the justices today did not appear ready to limit Americans' access to the abortion pill mifepristone. It's a case, though, that could have sweeping implications for how the federal government approves many medications. Anti-abortion activists protested outside of Walgreens headquarters in Deerfield Tuesday. At the same time, abortion rights groups rallied outside Chicago's federal court building.
Abortion pills are here to stay.
This all happening as the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case over the FDA's approval of the medication mifepristone. The two opposite sides of the reproductive rights debate voiced their opinions on the drug, which is one of the most common ways for women in America to end a pregnancy.
It is an outrage that a medication that the FDA approved over 20 years ago and has been safely used by more than 5 million people in the United States is now under attack.
It would be a deep dive into something the court itself said it wouldn't do, which is decide for the nation.
Abortion opponents asked the justices to limit access to mifepristone.
Walgreens and CVS, get out of the abortion industry. The United States Supreme Court, stop the unsafe distribution of these pills through telemedicine, through the mail, and at pharmacies.
But the Supreme Court justices seemed concerned that the doctors who brought the case were not reasonably impacted by how the drug is regulated. Even conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett seemed to doubt that the doctors in the suit were actually harmed by the FDA's actions.
The difficulty here is that, at least to me, these affidavits do read more like a conscience objection is strictly to actually participating in the abortion to end the life of the embryo or fetus. And I don't read either Scott or Francis to say that they ever participated in that.
In one possible resolution, the justices could avoid some of the more politically sensitive aspects of the case while preserving access to mifepristone. The decision is expected by early summer. Live in the newsroom, Shannon Halligan, WGN News.
All right, Shannon, thank you.
Abortion is healthcare. Healthcare is a right.
Much more to come here on First at 4.
As the Supreme Court hears arguments about access to a widely used abortion medication,
People on both sides of the issue rally here in the Chicago area.
I'm Tia Ewing, back on the live desk. The Supreme Court hearing arguments today about access to a commonly used abortion medication and appeared poised to preserve access. In the nearly 90 minutes of arguments, a consensus appeared to emerge among the justices that abortion opponents who challenged the FDA's approval of the medication mifepristone lack the legal right or standing to sue. If the judges did rule that way, it would leave in place current rules that allow patients to receive the drug by mail. Abortion access has, of course, been an especially contentious topic since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Today, those for and against a restriction on the medication held rallies here in our area regarding this very issue. The pro-life rally taking place in Deerfield, while supporters of abortion access rallied at the Chicago Federal Building today. Mifepristone is one of 2 drugs used in medicated abortions. More than 6 million people have used the medication since the year 2000.
The Supreme Court hearing arguments today on the abortion pill mifepristone and whether easier access to it should remain in place. The justices will consider the Biden administration's appeal of lower court rulings that restricted access. For now, the Supreme Court has been allowing the FDA to continue regulating the drug while the appeals process plays out. That includes continued telemedicine prescriptions and retail pharmacy dispensing.
There's a possibility that the court will address the Comstock Act, which is a 19th century obscenity law, which some abortion opponents are hoping the Trump administration, if there is a second Trump administration, will treat as a de facto ban on all abortions.
New data shows nearly 2/3 of all abortions in the U.S. rely on mifepristone. As the court hears arguments, protesters gathered outside in D.C. Groups from both sides say they want their voices heard. Supporters of the drug who showed up outside the Supreme Court say the drug is safe, while anti-abortion advocates argue the drug could be harmful to women.
That said, activists were on the streets here in the Chicagoland area as well.
Sylvia joins us now with that part of the story.
Don and Scott, from the city to the suburbs, there were several rallies as the Supreme Court hears the abortion pill arguments. One group called Students for Life of America and the Pro-Life Action League held its protest at the Walgreens headquarters in Chicago. CVS and Walgreens are the 2 largest pharmacy chains in the U.S. that will be selling mifepristone. They conducted their rally in conjunction with the rallies at the U.S. Supreme Court today.
Walgreens and CVS, get out of the abortion industry. The United States Supreme Court, stop the unsafe distribution of these pills through telemedicine, through the mail, and at pharmacies.
Several pro-choice groups staged their own rallies today, including one at Chicago's Federal Court building. They say mifepristone has been safely used in the U.S. for more than 2 decades and for decades before that in Western Europe.
This is a terrifying attack on a safe form of healthcare, and we will fight it, and we will make sure that we win, so that medication abortion remains an accessible option for everyone.
The Supreme Court won't likely issue an opinion on this until June.
Abortion is healthcare. Healthcare is a right.